Welcome. I'm Henrike Altink. Thank you all for joining this webinar today. And I want to start by making some introductions and give you a bit of housekeeping. So this webinar is being hosted by the Interdisciplinary Global Development Center, or the IGDC. It's based at the University of York, and it is an interdisciplinary learning and research community for equitable global development. We do research that focuses on social justice, global health, and sustainable environments. And we also offer a BA program and a PhD program. We bring together researchers working on development from across the University of York, but also globally. And we encourage researchers to work with one another, but also with policymakers and practitioners to address global development challenges. Before I address and mention our panel today, I want to say a few housekeeping points. First of all, this webinar is being recorded, but we only record video and audio of the panelists. Your mics as attendees are muted and your video is off, so you won't be recorded. It's only if you type questions into the Q&A function that may be identifiable based on your Zoom name. If you have questions for the panel, please type them into the Q&A function. But if you have any technical issues, then use the chat function for that, and one of our team will answer that question. If you are using Twitter for this webinar, you can use the hashtag IGDC webinar. And if you are typing questions in the Q&A, then you might want to address them to particular panelists, but if you see a question that you like, you can like it, and then we will look at that when we do a final Q&A towards the end. So introducing our panel today, we have Dr. Gail Rigobert. She is also an advisory member of the Interdisciplinary Global Development Center. She is a global climate change champion, an intrinsically motivated, passionate, and innovative thinker who has combined for about 12 years of experience in academia in the area of international relations, 10 years in political leadership and representation, and she really has worked on bringing tangible solutions to very complex socio-economic challenges. We also have Jamida Dagnat joining us from Washington, and she's the Director for Climate Justice at the Open Society Foundation. She has multi-regional expertise in climate justice, and she has worked in the private, the non-profit, and in the public sector. She has worked, amongst others, as the UK policy lead and negotiator for the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. And in 2019, she was recognized by The Ecologist as one of the 25 most influential women climate leaders. And then finally, joining us from Hong Kong is Harry Chan, who, since retiring from business, has been raising awareness about the impact of marine trash issues called the ghost nets. These are discarded, abandoned, and lost fishing nets. And he's conducted many cleanup drives with NGOs, with schools, with families, with corporations, and has also inspired thousands of divers and volunteers. In 2020, he was awarded the Medal of Honor by the Hong Kong government in recognition of his dedicated community service, as well as contribution to the promotion of environment and conservation education. So I'll hand over now to Gail.
Thank you, Enrique. It's so good to be here. Yamid, Harry, Alam, thank you for availing yourselves. I know that the COVID-inspired frenzy regarding where we are with everything is not new to you, but particular to our discourse today is where are we with respect to the SDGs? And like a colleague asked me last Thursday in London, is it that COVID-19 is being used as the very convenient excuse for everything that has been delayed, thwarted, or somehow retarded or slowed down? And I would like to say that against the backdrop that as we take stock of the SDGs, leave no one behind, push no one behind, and don't get left behind, that we do so, as difficult as it may sound, outside of the context of COVID-19, and to not refer to COVID-19 as a very convenient excuse for everything that's delayed. Because there is no denying that many of the countries have already or had already been falling behind with respect to meeting the various benchmarks as articulated in the various SDGs. When we brainstormed this conference/webinar, and with the temptation to want to speak on many of the goals, we realized and agreed that perhaps goal number 17 can be perceived as the goal that undergirds the other 16. It is the linchpin goal, because each of those goals, if we are to pursue them as a collective, as an international or global community, we recognize that we cannot do it alone. That indeed we need one another. And that is why partnerships, to my mind, goal number 17, undergirds the other goals, recognizing the indivisibility of the other goals as well. As I combed through some of the ones that occupy our mind most in a more pressing way, coming from a small island developing state in the Caribbean, whether it be goal number 1 on poverty, or goal number 4 on education, or 13, 14, climate change, life underwater or on land, as we go through the various goals. Are we confident that all things being equal, that we are well poised to deliver to the majority of the world's population that which the goals have promised? And that is why, therefore, we have focused on goal number 17, recognizing that we cannot go it alone, and indeed we can go farther, faster together. I thank you for joining us, and I know you are in for a treat as my colleagues Alam, Yamid, and Harry will walk you through their respective experiences of this journey with the SDGs and will relay their experiences to you as well. Thank you, and I now hand over to Enrique.
Thank you, Gail. So first of all, I want to welcome our third panelist, Professor Alam Ahmed, who is Professor of Knowledge Management and Sustainable Development at Queen's Mary University in London. He was founding president of the World Association of Sustainable Development and the founding director of Sustainable Development Goals Universities Initiative. Before going to Queen Mary, Alam was the co-director for the University of East London's Centre for Islamic Finance, Law and Communities. And he also spent 15 years at the University of Sussex Science Policy Research Unit. Alan, you've got about 15 minutes to talk about the role of higher education and cross-collaboration.
Thank you very much. It's my pleasure to join you today. Thank you very much, Dr. Gail, and thank you very much, Professor Henrik, and thank you to all your team at York. I have heard lots of good and fantastic work over the last many years, but shamefully, I have never been to York, and I promise you one day I will visit University of York because I feel ashamed of myself not being there. I am going to make the best use of my 15 minutes so I can go through my slide. But thank you very much for the opportunity, fantastic opportunity. Thank you very much. Now, the title of your webinar is perfect, Leave No One Behind. And I am going just to look into the angle of role of higher education. And WSD, you can go to our website. We do lots of things, and we are very much open. We would like to collaborate with everyone, and I hope next time either you visit us or we visit you, and we start collaborating in all the various things we do. We have a strong partnership with the United Nations, became very strong from 2016, where we have contributed to 3 major United Nations projects. One of them I just brought here for the interest of this webinar. We have worked with the United Nations, connecting them with all academics across the world on policy research, where the UN was arguing all countries to use research and policy research for their decision making. This is a UN conference we hosted with the UN. You can see Dr. Gail Rigobert there. I was very pleased on this conference because it was not just having like 6 or 7 under secretaries of the United Nations general secretaries, but also you can see the domination of women. There were 4 women there. One of them is very young. So we've been involved with all these issues. We always try to have equality in terms of women and young generations. Now, what I'm trying to do today is to try to look to what higher education institution, universities, for example, can do to help task with these 2 issues. One of them is leaving no one behind. And here I'm talking about the community, how universities should engage with community. And secondly, which is more important, about the partnership, which is the Sustainable Development Goal number 17. I agree and echo everything Gail said earlier. This is a goal which is supposed to link all of them together. So I'm going quickly. I highlighted the 5 main areas. I know the time will not allow me to touch on all of them in details. Very happy to come to you again and talk more specific about each one of them. But I will look at the role of universities in supporting communities. What are the major obstacles still universities are facing? And the new role, what is the new role, particularly after COVID-19? And the new model we are proposing for our new, if you like, initiative, which is called SDGs universities. Now, the data sources, you're all familiar with it, World Bank, United Nations Development Program, Human Development Report. We have this data set from many years. We use it all the time. But very important here, I would like to highlight that even in their own words, IMF, World Bank, United Nations, this is stated in many reports. Data is not available for every country. We talk about global. Global means Sudan, means Nigeria, means Indonesia, means Jakarta, means Saint Lucia. It's not just Europe. But the data for all these countries is not complete. I just highlighted between 2 brackets, Africa is one of the countries where you do not find the data complete in order to do any analysis. Secondly, most of these countries where there is not enough or adequate data, according to the UN and other various international reports, they do estimation like age, births, and so on. I'm just giving you one quote from the United Nations Environment. And interestingly, they said there is a big problem with the data, particularly, for example, they're giving example of renewable energy and energy efficiency projects and policies. The whole issue in the world is now about energy. And in this one particular topic or subject, energy and energy efficiency, we do have a problem with availability of data. So my point here, universities all across the world, they should try to address this issue, collaborate in making this data available to the UN and other institutions so we can do good analysis. This is the SDGs, which I don't want to go into them. This is the goal referred to. And if we read the shortest one line by the United Nations itself, it says, this goal is about to strengthen the means of implementation and revitalize the global partnership for sustainable development. Now, the United Nations defined partnership as a voluntary and a collaborative agreement. And here we have to look at it the same like airlines, strategic alliance. South African Airlines have a strategic airlines with British Airways. What does that mean? You take care of my passenger when he arrives London, he connecting to Glasgow with your flight. I take care of your passenger when he arrives Johannesburg, connecting, for example, to Port Elizabeth. It's not an enforcing, but it's a strategic alliance. So the partnership is a good word. It's a very big word, but at the end of the day, it can't be, you can't abide people to do it. They have to do it We have to do it. You come to my house, I look after you, and neither party has power to bind the other party. That's the problem. And this is the UN itself saying that it is good, we want to be partner, but it's not binding. The World Bank defined public-private partnership as long-term contract between a private party and a government agency for providing a public assets or service in which the private party bears significant risk and management responsibility. So I thought we bring these two definitions from the start because they will represent what we are doing in this webinar. When we work with the United Nations, Dr. Gail was there participating, giving a keynote speech. This is the summary of the recommendation came of that big conference, 4 days in Geneva, academics, United Nations, private sector. So the recommendation was the UN itself at 2018, they said we have to revise the guidelines to the partnership. There isn't a clear guidelines for the partnership. We need to set rules and operational guidelines. Many companies came there, multinational, they said, it's not very clear how do we really, there is literature, but it's all about contractual agreement because I'm going to take too much risk. Brokering and advice, facilitation and advance. This conference documentation, resources is all available on the website. I can send you the link. It's all there, so I'm going to skip it quickly. Everything with videos, with everything. Now, if we want to make sure we are not leaving anyone behind, we need to start from the basic. We all have been going through all these, at least these 9 challenges. I have talked before, and many of my colleagues, and I would assume also you at York have done the same. We have been warning the whole world with food production. Arab countries, the richest countries, Saudi Arabia, UAE, they are talking day and night about food security, energy, climate change, ecosystem, health and development, and so on and so forth. But these are challenges we all been affected by. Everything in our geopolitics now, our prime minister is struggling. You have seen, you're all following her. One of the reasons is energy. One of the reasons is conflict and terrorism. And one of the reasons is energy security and supply. One of the reasons is food production, and so on and so on. You can see, we can't say these are issues affecting those in developing countries. They are not affecting us. And I remember very well, Dr. Gail Rigobert, she said to the UN climate change conference round in Paris, I remember this was in the BBC, Gail said to them, by 2050, you are talking about islands, they will disappear. They're not just going to be affected, they will disappear. So that's quite a strong statement. How do we, countries are responding, particularly universities? And I'm taking this good example from the Academy of Scientific Research and Technology in Egypt. Universities in Egypt, they have been tasked to look at the global challenges and the Egyptian challenges. So for example, they said, let's map them together. So globally, sustainable development and climate change is number 1. But in Egypt, the Egyptian universities are also identifying this as number 1 priority. Clean water came number 2. But look here at number 3 from the global perspective, which is population and resources. From the Egyptian perspective, 3-4 years ago, number 3 for Egypt is energy, not population and resources. Number 4 in the EU, across the whole world, it is democratization. For Egypt, number 4 was health issue. What does this mean? We think globally, but we act locally. And this example of the Egyptian university is a very good example. Universities should do the same. We in the UK, we should think globally like you're doing here, but we act also locally because we got our local problems. Now, one example also, universities, they need to collaborate. This is the UN. Back 10 years ago, the UN warned all the world that by 2030, where these SDGs are supposed to be implemented, we will have people dying in numbers bigger than those who are currently, we are losing them from tuberculosis, malaria, HIV, and others, simply from using traditional fuels likely to be greater than those. And these traditional fuels, like who is using this mostly in Africa and other countries. So sooner, in less than 8 years, we will have a big issue of people losing their lives simply because of the way they are cooking their food. So really, universities need to share knowledge. For example, at Sussex, where I used to work, we were running one of the largest energy projects, and so on and so forth. We need to share, we need to collaborate. Another issue we also need to take into account, One important target for the United Nations SDG is 4.7, which is education for sustainable development and global citizenship. This is very important. We are global citizens. But if you look here at the end, the UN itself, back before COVID, they said the UN currently not aware of data for this indicator. This is the United Nations own data center or resources at Oxford. Imagine this is a very important target, how we educate our kids about sustainable development and global citizenship. And we do not have the data. We are not aware what data to be used for this indicator. So who can solve this is universities. Now, before we had the sustainable development goals, when we had the Millennium Development Goals, many people were left out, disability. All the targets were counted for people without disabilities. And this is no wonder. Steve Wonder told us in a big event, he said, you need to make every single thing accessible to every single person. Exactly what is your webinar is about. Leave no one behind. This is Steve Wonder is telling us this story before, not including the needs of people with disability. And then you have to measure it. 80% of the people with disability live in poverty. Now, we'll move the debate quickly. The World Bank and other international organizations, they all argue, I would assume you all agree with me. Now, how we judge the wealth or poverty of a nation these days is measured by the quality of higher education. And probably you all have listened 2 days ago to Jeremy Hunt when he was appointed the new chancellor. He said he strongly believes in the UK, we will get out of this. Why? Because he referred, we have good universities. If you look back, go back and listen to him 2 days ago, we will, I am confident, he said, we will get out of this financial troubles because we do have good universities. So you can see Qatar, UAE, Saudi Arabia is leading the way out of transforming itself out of oil dependency, universities, and so on. Now, after COVID-19, things have changed. Some universities simply couldn't function, particularly in Africa. They couldn't function because students at home, they can't connect them online. We here at Sussex, York, in many countries, we just switched to online. So this is changed the whole game. And now we are doing this online, as you all see. So we came with this idea last year. It's an initiative we wanted to do for many years. We launched it last week. Gail was there in the launch. But because of the time, you can go and look at it in more time. It's called Sustainable Development Goals. There is a video. I wouldn't spend time here, but you can listen to this video after we finish. Now, the idea is very simple. It comes from knowledge management. Knowledge management is about four things: acquiring knowledge, sharing knowledge, and keeping the knowledge, and make use or be the habit of doing the same. So get the knowledge, store it somewhere, share it, and then again do the same thing, cycle again. But all the consultants, the management reports, the research have told us, as an individual in an organization, you have like 10% of the knowledge you have is in your USB and your personal file. And there's 20% of the knowledge, say York University or Queen Mary, they have 20% of their knowledge in their shared drive or shared file, whatever it is. And there's 10% on people USB, but the biggest part, which is 70%, is actually in people's experience. The fact you know Gail, the fact Gail is now involved, that's a big knowledge for your center, for the university, because this is not something embedded, it's not a document, it's not an article. The connection, the interaction with Gail Rigobert is part of that 70%. There's so much you can learn from Gail. She was a minister, she was a opposition leader. She's someone, she wrote books on digital divide and so on. But that's not really in the system of York University. By now, you have much of her. How you can capture that 70%. So 10, 20, 70, not exact the figures, If you look at it from university perspective, so Queen Mary universities or maybe York, all they have in the global knowledge domain, they have 10%. And 20% is shared with the rest of the United Kingdom university system or knowledge system. And the rest of the 70% of Queen of York or Queen Mary is actually within the whole world domain. When Gail returned back to St. Lucia, I will talk about York. Now I am part of that 70. The idea is simple. There are 10 documents and you only have one, you're not going to succeed in the exam. That's why the question of collaborating, we need to collaborate because universities, they need to meet the challenges of implementing Agenda 2030. We need to explore new major global research challenges ahead, complementary of resources. Gail, St. Lucia, they know things, let's use them. York, I heard a lot of fantastic research from there, not just let's read about it or download the article, no, engage with them, invite them, try to collaborate with them like I'm doing now. I am collaborating, I'm not just presenting now. And not a substitute to national effort. Lessons learned, very important. We have worked before with the police in the UK about could it have been here? So we try to help them with the lessons learned bulletin, where every month they learn lessons. The police in York, they will say, this happened at York, here in York, this is how we dealt with it. So the people in Sussex, so the people in London, they learn how to deal with it before even it happened in London. It's called lessons learned bulletin. This is the police itself is using it, and so on and so on. Excuse me, there's many things we do. Why we do it now? There's a global and national collective effort to catch up, all of us, in the UK, in France, in Africa, in Middle East, global lockdown, reduction in income and economic crisis. There's no more I can say about economic crisis. Our Prime Minister is struggling for her own premiership because she might lose, we might not see her tomorrow. Changing technologies and the new rules post-COVID-19 with increasing role of youth and women. There is a huge movement, not just in developing countries, even here in this country. Young generation, they need to take the lead. They need to be involved. They need to govern. And you have the example of Finland. Youngest woman, 32 years, is a prime minister. So there is a big movement, not as a movement, but it is a real thing. Women have the power to lead countries. New Zealand is one example. And New Zealand, one of the countries, was very much well led during the COVID. So this is a huge thing. We can't ignore it. Even the UN is taking it very seriously in all the SDGs, 17 of them. Increasing competition between universities and so on. Quickly, we all need to look at our curriculum. Maybe here in the UK, we keep revising our curriculum, updating it with the market needs, with what is happening globally. But across the developing countries, there is a real outcry for, they are completely tired, very fatigued. We've been with the World Bank discussing back in 2016 how the entire Arab countries are not benefiting from the digital transformation, producing students who cannot fit in the market. So we really need to look into this. And we also need to make sure we have a leadership in collaboration. We need to take this as a serious leadership task. We need to innovate. We need to make sure. Bill Gates said in an article a month ago, without innovation, none of the SDGs are going to be achieved. That is someone we should listen to him. He's a big name. He's someone who is leading, who is directing us to Google and digital media. Now, we need to make sure, particularly at the time of vulnerability, develop the connecting teacher. And I keep repeating this. We need to be a connecting lecturers, professors. We cannot just come to the classroom and teach. We really need to connect with the students, with their families, with the global problem, with the UK problem. Because people on the street, as you will watch in the news in the morning, they will bring you a trader in maybe Romford, Sunday market. All he will tell you, I can't afford to pay my mortgage. You can't talk to him about logarithm or economic models. You need to give him. You need to connect with the real problem. Improve learning environment, support the student success, commit to continuous quality improvement. I will leave this slide quickly because I think this is quite familiar to all of you. We need to ensure we are widening participation and connect with community. I think this is all familiar to you. This is an example of the work we have been doing. We have done with the
Alan, can you wrap up, please?
I am. So I will just quickly go to the wrap up. I think we need to make sure we have new ways of addressing this issue with sustainable development, better integration of business and startup, enhancing local community cooperation. And this is what we mean, the new model. The university should be engaging, should be leading, and should be following. The three of them, they has to be done at the same time. Engaging, leading, and following. We need to be a university participating, facilitating, and enabling. The three issues as well. We need to make sure we have conversation. What we are having here is a conversation. We need to collaborate, and we need to make sure community always come within our discussion. We need to engage with the stakeholders and government. And I repeat, governments is very important, because effectively we have to start from community, and then we will communicate this with the government, and we need to have a very effective communication. Quickly, we need to be more informal. This was the Indonesian model, has been working very well. I have been to Indonesia, I've seen that. We need to be teaming across all levels of the community, all levels of the community. And I think this is my summary: implementing sustainability practice, challenging and require planning and execution. We need to make sure universities require to develop structure and processes to reconnect. This means they have been connected, but to reconnect and engage. Collaboration model must be based on ongoing innovation of business and enterprise. Korea, almost 90% on startups. Holistic approach should be considered for designing cooperation framework. I always refer to cooperation framework. Thank you very much. I'm really sorry if I exceed my time.
Thank you so much, Alam. We move on then from talking about collaboration in higher education to talk about interaction with agencies. So Yumit, over to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for the organizers to giving me the opportunity to be with you and to bring the insight of a philanthropy organization. And based on my experience as also a think, from the think tank and NGO community. There's a lot that Professor Han said that, I would echo, but what I'm going to try to do, I don't have any slides. I'm going to bring my insight based on the SDG 13 and SDG 16. SDG 13 because I am a climate expert, and SDG 16 because of who I represent, the Open Society Foundation. And the notion of human rights, is part of its DNA, and all of this, is very much echoing the importance of SDG 16, but SDG 17. But SDG 16 is about also the notion of conflicts, insecurity, weak institutions, limited access to justice. And because they are remaining very much a threat to sustainable development too. And these are issues that the Open Society, really look into. And the context is relevant with the war in Ukraine. So we went from, the COVID crisis to a war in Ukraine that had triggered an energy crisis, or maybe vice versa. The energy crisis triggered the war in Ukraine. It's all interlinked, but also, what becomes very apparent is the fact that we are failing to manage multiple crises. The energy, food, climate, COVID, and the war around the world. And all of these are exacerbating, our failure, are, weakening the multilateral system, are weakening our ability to really sustain and make progress to the sustainable development goals. The number of people fleeing war, persecution, and conflicts exceeded 70 million in 2018, the highest level recorded by the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, in almost 70 years. The number of people expected to be displaced by climate change, according to the latest IPCC report, the most authoritative scientific reports on climate change, is supposed to reach 200 million by 2030. But hey, just because of the floods happening in Pakistan, about 33 million people were displaced just overnight because of the flooding, and a third of a country was underwater. So you see, even those statistics, are being very much, tested, and, are getting dire more and more. Another driver that I wanted to highlight, why, the SDG 13 and 16, resonate with me in answering the question of partnership is, the fact that Global Witness just released a report, last month on land defenders. And they've recorded that 1,300 murders in the past decades. So can you believe 200 land defenders were killed last year? And that numbers is just increasing. The mining sector was a sector linked to the most killing. And in 2021, the disproportionate number of attacks against indigenous people continued, once again, with over 40% of all fatal attacks targeting indigenous people, despite them only making up 5% of the world's population. These were documented predominantly across countries like Mexico, Colombia, Nicaragua, Peru, and the Philippines, but as, Dr. Alan said, there's a lot of missing data. And, you can imagine that those figures are conservative, but the problem is, despite the Paris Agreement, despite, the SDG goals, the number of people, working towards sustaining our planet, defending our environment are getting killed, and that number is increasing. In addition, unfortunately, what we are seeing since the war in Ukraine is a lot of nations are backsliding on their mitigation commitments. And we see a lot of deals being made that increase the use of a fossil fuel industry, the fossil fuel, and Professor Alan again highlighted how it can undermine health, and this is just getting worse. We have normally this year, countries were supposed, after the COP26, countries agreed to phase down and phase or phase down or phase out the use of fossil fuel, and we don't see that. It's quite the contrary when you look at the deals being made and the record profit of the fossil fuel industry. And at the same time, we see these double standards. We see developed countries asking developing countries to still not use their their national resources, gas, that generate revenue at a time of debt distress, when they're actually setting up new deals to get more, sometimes coal and gas from the same countries for their own consumptions, especially in the European continent. On top of that, what we've seen is unfulfilled climate finance promises and development finance promises. In a few countries, we've seen that the ODA, the development aid, is reduced. That was the case in the UK. We heard in Sweden, and we're worried that this is going to continue. So yesterday I was at a meeting, a workshop highlighting the promoting a number of options on how we can finance the issue of loss and damage. Loss and damage is when you fail mitigation, you cannot adapt to me anymore, then you need to look at the limits of adaptation and face both economic and non-economic loss of damage, like sea level rise that will get a number of countries underwater, or all those rapid onset events that, like all the disasters that we see. So So as Minister Shona from the Maldives was saying during this workshop, if we failed mitigation, with adaptation lagging behind, and if we fail loss and damage, where do we go? And for decades, small islands nation and vulnerable nations have been asking countries, okay, yes, we need to mitigate, but let's look at also some of the priority. Let's not be blind, and let's make sure that we also have the means to adapt and to tackle those losses and damages that are affecting us the most, even if we have created the least the problem. And what we have seen over the past decades is a fear from developed countries over liability compensation that prevented any progress on this issue. And this is why what you will see in the next month at the COP27 in Egypt, the fact that the issue of loss and damage, so how to tackle the limits of adaptation is going to be so important, especially since, yes, in 2050, how many countries, how many islands will still be above the water? So what do we do about this? And this is where really, the SDG 16 is so important and more important than ever. I just wanted to give you that context, but, the trust, the issue of trust, and I have to say, unfortunately, trust is at its lowest, especially between developed and developing countries at the moment because of, double standards. I believe that what we need, more than ever is that trust building among nations, good faith, honesty, and empathy. And that's going to be very important to create the right innovative and political will to really get innovative partnerships between government, private sector, citizens, NGOs. And at the Open Society Foundation, we decided to double down on the issue of resilience. Our strategy so far, it's continuing to evolve, but at the moment we're really looking into fostering just transitions, but not just towards low carbon economy, but also resilient society. And because most philanthropic organizations have prioritized efforts on reducing emissions, we decided as a newcomer into the climate agenda to really support resilience. And in doing that, because we do have an endowment, we can use impact investment as well that are not just driven by profit, but can definitely have bet into the social dividends. We are looking into using our, financial tools, to create, public-private partnership, what we call blended finance, and especially in the, we are looking into setting up unprecedented, pioneering platforms, for adaptation. And this is important because in these regards, the private sector have been, very shy to support, efforts on adaptation because there were not a lot of profit gain, in this area. But this is absolutely critical. We're making the case, and we're hoping, to announce, in the next months or so, and to work with wealth sovereign fund, pension fund, as much as, all the different asset managers and investors, and including some of the institutions that have been set up, like the Green Climate Fund, to really try to get new ways, new financing mechanisms, into areas that have been very much lagging behind. And our lens, from philanthropy is that, we can act in a nimbler, quicker, and de-risking way. I think our role compared to, the donor countries, is that we can eventually take a little bit more risk. This is not necessarily what we have seen as much. I remember, the COP presidency from Egypt telling us, when they brought us into a round table for the first time, COP presidency and philanthropy, one of the first questions was, who are you? Are you a donor country or a philanthropy? Because we see you supporting mostly, sustaining the same trends, where we see still only 4%, of climate finance going into the African continent, only less than 2% going into small islands. What's your role in trying to make those trends also more, sustainable, fair, equitable than they are? So, OSF is trying, to go into those areas that were a little bit left behind. So that's an example of partnership, between, private sector and government. But we also, and philanthropy, we also look into innovative democratic channels, the importance of, citizens assemblies. And a number of countries, have done that. We've seen that in Scotland, in France, to really bring different stakeholders to really inform, shape, some of the policy framework to really get the chance to make them, more sustainable and equitable. And this is important because, when you do not have this, you could run the risk of what you've seen, like the Gilets jaunes, the yellow vest, movements, in France, when what could look like a good climate, fiscal policy, for, a green tax could have, some unintended effects, for the population. And if there's no dialogues, you would get a clash and could actually, and the result could be, going, backwards. In addition, there's also a lot of efforts to reform, and I would dare to say even decolonialize, some of the financial institutions. I'm saying that because last week I am in Washington, D.C., and last week you had, all finance ministers around the world gathering, to look into reforming the financial institution, especially the debt, to restructure the debt system that has been pretty unfair, with, rating processes for middle income countries and lower income countries, taxing them when they are the most vulnerable, like, or also to climate change. You can do a lot to strengthen your fiscal system, but then overnight, again, because of a hurricane, a drought, you lose everything, and you should not pay for this vulnerability. You should get even more support and cooperation, to address it. And it's good to see that, the V20, which is a group that started with 20 finance ministers from the most vulnerable countries, is now a group of 58 ministers around the world, really got together and produce some communities to really push the agenda. And OSF is very, happy to support them in getting an office in Washington, D.C., to make sure that they have even more access to U.S. regulators, to those, most influential decision makers, to really shape and transform the system. And the other dimension, of partnership I wanted to talk about was the intersectionality, and I think Dr. Lan also, mentioned that, the role of the youth is paramount. And, we see that a lot in the climate space. You've seen those youth in the streets, how they, I'm also glad, to see with, better access to education, you see more youth now as negotiators, supporting, not just shadowing, even, speaking for their countries. This is a case in Rwanda. I've seen that in Ethiopia. This is something when I was myself a negotiator, I didn't see this. So I am hopeful that we're going to see more of this empowerment of the youth, since, this agenda, has so much, it's of such an interest, for them, is so consequential for their future. The other, dimension is also the role of women. I think, Dr. Alan said that, we've seen more leadership, on climate for women. We do have a gender plans, required, by, for all countries. Dr. Gail Rigobert has been herself, he's seen still as, such a leader. And the other dimension that was tabooed and is emerging a little bit more is social racial justice, part of this, and how not only the most vulnerable communities are most affected, by climate change, but also indigenous, people. I gave you, some figures, and the those Black, people of colors as well. So this is an aspect, that is being looked at. And when it comes to the type of partnership, which brings also the role of diaspora, of the diasporas, whether it's, the African diaspora, Asian diaspora, how to use, these a little bit more to create the type of, partnership, collaboration, to really boost, some of those economic and socio economic collaboration that can really transform, the society. And the last
Jamida, could you
yes,
please wrap it up?
yes, and this is my last point. In order to do all of this, because one of the words in the SDG 17 is also implementation, and we are at a time of implementation. Actually, when it comes to the climate, we have agreed last year, some of the rules of the game we need to implement. And for this, I would insist about three things. The importance of accountability mechanisms, especially in the face of impunity and double standards, all those review mechanisms, governance, the importance of communication. Very often the oppositions are very sophisticated about this, and the role of universities to make this happen could be very much harnessed. And avoid the siloed approach, development climate, climate, human right, democracy, mitigation, adaptation, loss and damage. All of these so far have been very much siloed, and we have failed, to deal with those in a very effective way. And I think this is what we need to look at more, for stronger, effective partnership. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Yamida, for a wide-ranging overview of all the different possible partnerships, citizen assembly, the use of the diaspora. So there's a lot for us to talk about. But we're moving on then now to Harry Chan, who is going to talk about, amongst others, corporate social responsibility.
Thank you so much. Thank you very much, Dr. Gill and the team, having me tonight here. And then I'm a ghost net hunter. Ghost net is discard of fishing net. Anyway, after hearing from your expertise, I think I have a lot to say apart from fishing net, because I've been into the ocean for over 10 years. Why I use ghost net? Because I did a lot of research, survey, with the help of my volunteers, scientists, and all parties. And my finding is we don't actually know too much about the ocean at all, okay? Think about it. How much do we know about the ocean? I can tell you not really much at all. That's why when Ellen was talking about data, I need data. We need data for references, okay, for information, but it's not correct, most of it. Imagine with divers, what can we do? We can't do much. We have limitation, depth, weather, locality, and blah, blah, blah. That's why we need to think, we need to pay more attention to the ocean. And this is why I pick up GhostNet as my main point to raise awareness, not just in Hong Kong or Asia, globally, and hope everybody are going to pay attention to the ocean. And the ocean, that impact, what we all human has done to the ocean really affects. Yeah, I got so much to talk about it, but since we've got time limit, maybe in the future, if I have another opportunity to talk about it, I will tell you more in details, okay? GhostNet, well, there's a lot of things of impact about GhostNet. Okay, in fact, ecosystem, most of us know about the ecosystem, but how much do we know the impact to the ecosystem? Not very much. It affects our health. It does. Not many people are aware about it. It affects economic losses. I'm talking about economic losses of huge. You're talking about millions and millions of dollars. For example, all the boating, especially logistic like shipping liners, okay, container ship. When the propeller gets tangled, the ship will stop there. And then just imagine how much they lost. Not just the propeller. I mean, the transportation cost, everything. Anyway, also it affects the livelihood of the fishermen, because I've been talking to fishermen when I go to do cleanup in Philippines or Asia, other countries like Brunei or Malaysia. When I want to do something, when I want to find out something, I talk to the people. Like if I want to talk about the ocean, about overfishing, okay, I read something about commercial fishing, what they does, how much damages they have done by bycatch. Okay, then I talk to the fishermen in Philippines and why they are still using dynamite fishing, even cyanide. And then I find the reason why, because with all this commercial fishing, with all this new technology that help us to catch everything we want to. So the fishermen's got nothing to catch anymore. The only way they can do is use a dynamite. I say, why use dynamite? They say, Harry, please do not use your standard of living in Hong Kong or other country to compare with us, because they need to catch some fish. Okay, dynamite can bring them a few fish. At least they can feed their families. A few fish. Yeah, just a few fish. To them is a lot. If they can catch a little bit more, they can sell them for a few more dollars. Maybe a few dollars for us is nothing, okay? But to them is a lot. So we really have to we need to share knowledge. We need to have cooperation, okay? Not just within the university, or like we're sitting here discussing, which is what discussing a lot of major issues. It's as important, but however, we have to talk to the local people. Okay, I go to the Philippines, I go to other country, I bring volunteer from Hong Kong, I bring 10s or 20 volunteer on each trip. We learn from them. Okay, we learn the impact of fishing net. We learn the impact of other species that is damaging the ecosystem due to human activities. Okay, and I learned a lot from them, with something that I'm sure university might not hear about it. So I suggest when we do research, which is very good, disability research program, that means we have to travel to countries like Asia or even Caribbean, Africa, to talk to the local people, to talk to them about fishermen. Okay, we see the river, we see the lakes, They're all polluted. Yeah. Even in Asia, India, Pakistanis, the river all polluted, and then they supply drinking water. That's why we have a hygiene problem. Okay. Yeah. Also, we need another thing. This is how I got a feeling is with this ESG or SDGs. I think a lot of people are waiting for opportunity not or golden opportunity. Why I'm saying that? Because I've been talking to people, I can feel that they do not worry about what's going on. What they are looking for is, hey, come on, we got some investment coming in. This is something that we have not looked into it in detail. And then another problem I find out when I'm doing diving in the water, and then I see that, are we doing the right thing? Because one thing is, I talk to people, maybe we're doing something that we overprotecting certain species. Okay. For example, that's why you got a problem in Florida with lionfish. Now we got a problem in Mediterranean Sea too. It's because is our research doing the right thing? Are we overprotecting certain species, which is affecting the other species? That's why the ocean become imbalanced. Because sometimes when I go diving, how come certain species I see before, it's all gone? Whereas in other places, certain coral are all gone. And then they end up with just certain species of coral. I remember one time when I was in Philippines doing a cleanup, and then one of the scientists told me, Harry, I know you're not expertise, you're not a marine biologist, but it's simple. You just stay there for 2 minutes and watch in front of you just coral. And afterward, he asked me, hey, Harry, what did you see? I said, gee, I see everything. Beautiful corals, beautiful marine lives. Okay, the color is so fantastic, you know, nicely compound together. He said, Harry, you got the answer. This is what happened to our research. Because if you overprotect something, you're making out balance. I'm sorry I have to bring out this point, because this is what I feel after doing 10 years research with a lot of that. I mean, I've been doing a lot of underwater cleanup hundreds of times with many people volunteer, even scientists, with the locals. Okay, this is how I feel. I'm trying to bring myself back into the water so I can tell you what I exactly see, that many of you not be able to see. I understand the reason is because I asked a lot of people. They told me, Harry, we live so far away from the coast. I'm sure even in England, if you live in New York, it takes you about driving maybe 5 or 6 hours to drive to East Coast, or even longer to the West Coast, okay? And it's hard for any corporation or other institute to try to organize any cleanup, not the cleanup. This is what I'm doing now. When I go to do cleanup with schools, sometimes with corporation, I would tell them, we're there not just to do cleanup, we're there. Hopefully you can find the impact. When you see all the trash, ask yourself, what have you seen? Okay, ask yourself, did you see something that might be come out of you? For example, maybe a plastic bottle, where we are talking about single plastic, any plastic bags. I tell you a thing, I see so much that you don't see in the ocean. 80% of the trash human make are in the ocean. I see domestic waste, medical waste, construction waste, all kind of waste. I see batteries, I see computers, I see racks, everything in the ocean. And another thing, we're all talking about carbon emission. And I've been talking to a lot of people that are concentrating on what we're talking, like what we do today, SDGs, or nobody mentioned to me that ocean is a sink for, let me try to pronounce that word, for anthropogenic carbon. Fishing net, such as trawling, cages, when they go to do fishing, they're dragging out so much carbon out of the seabed. And not many of us notice about that. Yeah. So we really need to pay attention to the ocean, apart from the air or the land. We got so much problem in the ocean. Honestly, I tell you the truth. We just have too much problem in the ocean that not many people, I'm dare to say, even the United Nations, they never mentioned about that. I was surprised. I've been hearing a lot of big corporation, when there's somebody, maybe a CEO, when they're talking about ESG or whatever, you can easily tell that the information they got on the hand is being written by the sustainability department, or they say human resource department, and they can they copy from here and there. So that's why if you go into listen to somebody, they're speaking all the same stuff, and this is the problem. Collaboration, not just between university and university. It's between university globally. Cooperation, not just within university or country to country. We have to connect with governments, a lot of big corporation. Therefore, we can start to tackle the root cause, not just for those net, for plastic, for carbonization, whatever. And big corporations only one.
Harry, can you please wrap it up, please, so we have time for Q&A.
Okay. Anyway, let me see. Okay, I think the only way we can, if university can think about it, or if any big finance company, they want to invest in innovation, we need innovation, because I think the only way we can get the proper data and then try to find out what exactly happening in the ocean, we need a robot team of divers. This is, I'm trying to think about it, because robotic diver can go into the ocean. No limitation of depth or the weather, whatever, and they can get any detail we want to, we need for our research. Like a lot of people talking about me, even in Hong Kong, dolphin get killed and the whale get killed. Why don't we do innovation like simple? I'm talking to one shipping company. I mean, we have like a summary concept, like we put a scanner on a boat. So every time when they go through a certain area, like in Hong Kong, before they go to the terminal, the sonar, when they detect some whales, we don't have whales in Hong Kong now, unfortunately. We have a lot of dolphins, okay? Then they will slow down. Either they slow down or they change courses.
Harry?
Yeah.
Can I thank you for your presentation thus far? And
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, because you're out in the front lines doing this, interacting with people who are directly affected. I remember it was Rex Nettleford from Jamaica who said that poor people do not destroy the environment deliberately. They are simply eking out a living, and in so doing, happen to affect the environment. And I think what you are suggesting is, how do we balance that need for survival, for people to meet their somatic needs, while also preserving planet Earth? So thank you very much for that. We've got some very interesting comments and questions here in the chat room. I begin with the last that I'm seeing here, which is, how can universities become better at making research more accessible to the wider public? I think Harry was intimating that very often research tends to remain in the domain of universities and the agency that has an immediate or direct interest in the research being undertaken. So I throw this out to the panelists. How can universities make research more accessible? And immediately, one of the things that comes to mind is to make the lexicon more palatable, to relay the research findings in ordinary language that people can connect with and can relate to. Alam?
That's a very good question. And if you remember, back in early 20s, the 2000, the whole discussion was to the movement of the open access and to make all publications available free of charge and people can download them. And we campaigned for that. And I think we are reaching quite a good point. But that's not answering the question. The question is about how do we connect with the ordinary citizen? We need to engage with them in a way where we find them. How can they reach us? They are not. They are not. The ordinary citizens are not the people who they go to their computer and look for literature review and search on the websites. No, we need to find where they are. We need to be engaging more with the community. We need to listen to them directly. That's the other thing. We need to make sure our research, if it does not make an impact on the community, I think it is useless, to be honest, because this is where the universities are now being judged. What impact have you made to the community? How much you are involved with the community? So to answer your question more, if you like, specifically, we need to address the question of the community, ordinary citizen, their role in science and technology and so on, how and where we can listen to them, how we can listen to them more effectively, how can we engage them in the data setting, in the surveys and so on, how can we speak to them in the language they do understand, and how do we be more patient? The problem I can see now, Gail, particularly is being exacerbated by the COVID. The academics, I mean, I'm talking about all over the world. I deal with academics from all over the world. They're becoming so busy. You can't get hold of them. They are just teaching, I'm busy, we, the academics, cannot even talk to them. We can't have lunch together. I remember 20 years ago at the university, we used to go and have lunch together. We used to play football in Edinburgh, I remember, as staff. That's all gone now. So academics, they need to understand, they need to find the time. They need to find quality time with their community. And I think that's a very, very important issue, Gail, need to really be addressed in another webinar like this. Because we cannot just continue publishing papers and books and speaking conferences and that's it. No, that's not what's the role of an academic.
Thank you very much. Yamid, you raised a very curious question regarding the need to decolonize the financial institutions, and especially within the context of a conversation that is really gaining currency. It has a long history, but more recently it has gained new resonance, and that is with respect to the vulnerability index. In your experience, and given where you are in the heart of Washington, D.C., are you encouraged that there is movement in the international financial space to accommodate that kind of thinking and to make the necessary adjustments with respect to how more vulnerable countries are dealt with, especially with respect to debt financing?
Thank you, Gail. This is an important question. You know, I have mixed feelings. I think I am encouraged because I know there are solutions. There's, you know, a paper on this. I think, you know, there's two things that gives me encouragement. The fact that vulnerable nations are organizing themselves, collaborating more, you know, to really push for joint requests. And you know, when you negotiate individually with your creditor, it's not the same if you come full force with, you know, 58 countries, you know, pushing for, you know, the same things. So I think it's a combination of identifying great champions. I think Maya Motley from, you know, the Caribbean is a great champion. We heard a Bridgestone agenda, you know, but she cannot do this alone. So if, you know, her agenda is also taken over and, you know, made even more ambitious, you know, by a group of 58 vulnerable countries, which is part of, you know, that can, you know, make a difference. If we support, you know, those countries, you know, to have access to be where the decisions, is being taken, I think that can make it. So all of this is happening right now. They're coming with some data, but hey, we need to support this with the right communication level. It's both, right for this. I remember this V20, they released a paper on debt. If I am honest, if it was written by Nick Stern, or this paper would be all over the news. It was not. So we need to see how to amplify and to support this. As also Dr. Alan said, it cannot be off the shelf. We need to translate that technicality to the language that everybody can understand, and find different type of communication too, not just written communication, but oral communication. Some communities only speak orally. How to do this with different means. So using parliamentarians, using chiefs, using faith-based communities. So I just wanted to say I am encouraged, but the battle is not there. It's not finished. It's happening. But another thing that university can do, that repository storage, there are precedents. Gail, when we are asking countries, oh, we want a facility, and we're telling them, oh, that's going to take 10 years, it's too late, people. Actually, there's been precedent. We have set up in 1979, IFAD in 3 years, in the context of all crisis, in the context of food crisis. Why can't we do this? Why can't we open an administrative accounts for, like we did for Ukraine? So also university, can get those data, can hold accountable, those countries to avoid those double standards and help get more equitable outcome at the pace that we need.
And thank you. There's a very interesting question here with respect to trust, and I know that Harry intimated that as well. How do we reconcile the issues of corporate social responsibility, trust, and how do we ascertain the altruism, the honesty, the sincerity, especially in the context of private-public partnerships and private financing for some of the activities that are necessary with respect to, like Harry was saying, his activities in the ocean. So Harry, I'm asking you, in your work, in your line of work, are you satisfied that the private sector in particular is ready to partner with someone like you, and that they truly embrace the sentiment that you bring to your work and the wider concern about the pursuit of the SDGs, there wherein we have concerns about conservation as well? Harry?
We are always ready to collaborate with anyone, anywhere. Yeah. Even to big corporation, because as I was saying, in order to solve some of the problem or to reduce the problem, we need to start to look at ways to tackle the root cause, okay, and find solution to reduce the problem. For example, I've been in a export-import business many years ago. I've been to the States, Europe, and like Alan say, sharing a knowledge and collaboration. We need this within a big corporation. I give you an example. A big multi-international company, they're the one, if their CEO or their purchasing department director or the account director, if they can sit down together and know something about SDGs, the 70 goals. Don't just think about the cost and profit. This is the problem. When you go to a supplier, even from my country, China, or any country, if you want to change their material, they will tell you it's very expensive. The cost is high. That's not true. And the buyer do not know, oh my God, even 1% is enough. we need to change this way of buying.
Thank you, Harry. In fact, that leads me to a question I have here regarding how do we reconcile our own ambitions as good citizens wanting to pursue the SDGs and ensure that they deliver to the majority of the world's population with the necessity for profit making or profiteering, as Harry has described. What more do you think can be done to ensure that we reconcile those ambitions? Yes, the private sector is concerned about its bottom line. Academics like ourselves, practitioners, researchers, we want to ensure that more people buy into the SDGs and the pursuit of those goals, but also that the political directorate itself too is plugged into this, and that they have prioritized pursuit of the SDGs and not only in terms of rhetoric, but also to have the commensurate financing to ensure that these are realized. What do you see as some inherent, perhaps, or forced inconsistencies, ambiguities with respect to those multiple pursuits? How do we reconcile those? Alan?
Thank you, Gail. I think this is also one of the big questions always being asked. And I think the answer is, number one, we need to improve and invest more in education and awareness. We need to educate the public, because we can't just look to what happened in our government here. Boris Johnson was asking us to stay at home and he was having party in the house. So that's not the message we should give. And I remember that the discussion 3 years ago before COVID about how much of the footprint of us, the academics. We travel a lot. Part of the academic culture, I go to China, I go to Africa, to St. Lucia, huge traveling. Can it be done better than that? That was a question I was asked, and my director was asked this question many times. You travel every week. So we need, number one, we need to improve education, we need to improve communication, and also engage with communities so they understand what is sustainability, why we're doing this, and so on. Let's just give you examples. The plastic bags, the 5B one. Many people now, you talk to them, they say to you, Alam, is not working. So what, you charging me 5B for a plastic bag? People, they don't even know where is the money of that 5B is going, or where is it gone. Many people, they question that. So these are all will help to change the behavior and get people to commit to things. Governments need to take it very seriously, and I agree with you, government needs to put money onto this. And number three, I think very importantly, we need to be more using innovation, creativity, and be more, if you like, smart in the production. And I will take you back, I think 7-8 years ago, when many people campaigned for fair trade. So the farmer in Kenya can get his banana, or someone from the St. Lucia can get his banana in London being bought, so the money will go back to the farmer in Kenya, or whatever it is. Was a good idea, and it did work, and many people start buying into fair trade. But you want people, when they go to the supermarket, they want to choose the fair trade banana, but you don't want them to find it more expensive than the normal banana. So that's where the universities should play a role. Yes, I would like to help the environment. I would like to be sustainable, but I can't afford to pay more money for it, and so on and so forth. So awareness, government commitments, leading by examples, and another thing is we try to use innovation to be more productive and very efficient, and that's what universities are there for, because we need to make sure it is achievable, it is accessible, it is affordable, and that's where I think we all need to do. And just one last thing to close this one. Near where I live in South London, I went to a new market open. There's lots of shops. My daughter buying a drink or something, and at my back, there was a kebab shop. And suddenly I realized on the back of the guy t-shirt is saying, sustainable kebab. And then I turned to him, I left my daughter, I said to him, hello, can you tell me what do you mean by sustainable kebab, really? And when you come to London, Gail, I will invite you to this sustainable kebab. So you will see it, it's true story. And I said to the guy, what do you mean by sustainable kebab? And he said to me, the boss will explain to you. Then the boss came And he told me, and he was so educated to me, we source all the material we buy here from local shops. Excellent. So we are not buying things which is coming a long way from Australia or New Zealand or maybe Africa or something. Number two, we tried all the time to buy resources which are organic or natural. And so on. And he went on. And as I said, I said to him, I will really have to bring my colleague to come and see you because his understanding of sustainability is right. And I think what we will help him, or we should help him, to let him market that idea better so he can get more customers. Next time, if you come here, Gail, and I'll take you for lunch, we will go to him because he had made an effort to buy local produce and so on. Yes, sustainable, and I had a picture on my Facebook, you can see it, sustainable kebab. So it's a big cycle, but it needs everyone, government, community, educator. And I think us academics, we should take a bigger responsibility because this is our job. We are educators. I always treat academics as educators, not scientists or just discovering new vaccine. No, we are educators. We are teachers. And that's what I said. Universities should produce more connecting teachers, connect. And that's what I think could be part of the solution.
Thank you, Alam.
Can you? Okay, well, I'm very sorry, but we've reached the end of this webinar, which has been incredibly stimulating. And I think what I'm taking away from this is the word that Jamila used. She said, we need to have innovative partnerships. And your comment, Alan, your last comment was very much about that. Bring different people together who might not, and groups and individuals together who might not have worked together. And together they can come up with more creative ideas to help us get somewhere towards achieving the SDGs, which when we started talking about the multiple crises have been significantly hindered by the local crisis, but also the major global ones that we're facing at the moment. So thank you all three panelists for your stimulating discussions, and Gail for bringing you all together. And I hope to see many of you again at one of our next webinars, including the annual lecture that we have next month as well by Dipesh Chakrabarti. And if you follow us on our social media platforms, you'll get information about that very soon. So thank you all so much. And we hope that we can all collaborate at some point again. Bye-bye.